To the Right Honourable Sir Robert Carr, Viscount Rochester, Knight of the Most Noble Order of the Garter, and one of His Majesty's Most Honourable Privy Council, my right noble lord, I present to your voice leisure of survey these few sparks found out in our most glorious prince's ashes. I could not have thought this worthy your view, but that it aims at the preservation of his fame, than which I know not anything, but the sacred lives of both their majesties and their sweet issue, that can be dearer unto you. Were my whole life turned into leisure, and that leisure accompanied with all the muses, it were not able to draw a map large enough of him, for his praise is an high-going sea that wants both shore and bottom. Neither do I, my noble lord, present you with this night piece to make his deathbed still float in those compassionate rivers of your eyes. You have already, with much lead upon your heart, sounded both the sorrow royal and your own. Oh, that care should ever attain to so ambitious a title. Only, here though I dare not say you shall find him live, for the assurance were worth many kingdoms, yet you shall perceive him draw a little breath, such as gives us comfort his critical day is past, and the glory of a new life risen, neither subject to physic nor fortune. For my defects in this undertaking, my wish presents itself with that of marshals, O utinam mores animum giffinger pisem. Pulchrior in terris nulla tabella forae. Howsoever, your protection is able to give it noble lustre, and bind me by that honorable courtesy to be ever your honor's truly devoted servant, John Webster. A monumental column of funeral elegy. The greatest of the kingly race is gone, yet with so great a reputation laid in the earth, we cannot say he's dead, but as a perfect diamond set in lead, scorning our foil, his glories do break forth, worn by his maker, who best knew his worth. Yet to our fleshy eyes there does belong that which we think helps grief, a passionate tongue. Methinks I see men's hearts pant in their lips. We should not grieve at the bright sun's eclipse, but that we love his light, so travelers stray, wanting both guide and conduct of the day. Nor let us strive to make this sorrow old, for wounds smart most when that the blood grows cold. If princes think that ceremony meet, to have their corpse embalmed to keep them sweet, much more they ought to have their fame expressed in Homer, though it want Darius' chest, to adorn which in her deserved throne, I bring those colors which truth calls her own. Nor gain nor praise by my weak lines are sought, love that's born free cannot be heard nor bought. Some great inquisitors in nature say, royal and generous forms sweetly display much of the heavenly virtue, as proceeding from a pure essence and elected breeding. Howe'er, truth for him thus much doth importune, his form and value both deserved his fortune, for 'tis a question not decided yet, whether his mind or fortune were more great. Methought I saw him in his right hand wield a caduceus, in th other palace shield, his mind quite void of ostentation, his high erected thoughts looked down upon the smiling valley of his fruitful heart, honor and courtesy in every part proclaimed him, and grew lovely in each limb, he well became those virtues which gracked him. He spread his bounty with a provident hand, and not like those that sow in grateful sand, his rewards follow reason, ne'er were placed for ostentation, and to make them last. He was not like the mad and thriftless vine that spendeth all her blushes at one time, but like the orange tree his fruits he bore, some gathered, he had green, and blossoms store. We harped much of him, till death made hope we stood as in some spacious theatre, musing what would become of him. His flight reached such a noble pitch above our sight, whilst he discreetly wise this rule had won, not to let fame know his intents till done. Men came to his court as to bright academies of virtue and of valor, all the eyes, that feasted at his princely exercise, thought that by day Mars held his lance, by night Minerva bore a torch to give him light. As once on Rhodes, Pindar reports, of old soldiers expected he would have rained down gold, old husbandmen I the country gone to plant laurel instead of elm, and made their vaunt their sons and daughters should such trophies wear when as the prince returned conqueror from foreign nations, for men thought his star had marked him for a just and glorious war. And, sure, his thoughts were ours. He could not read Edward the Black Prince's life, but it must breed a virtuous emulation to have his name so lag behind him both in time and fame, he that like lightning did his force advance, and shook to center the whole realm of France, that of warm blood opened so many sluices to gather and bring thence 6 flowered Deluces, who ne'er saw fear but in his enemy's flight, who found weak numbers conquer, armed with right, who knew his humble shadow spread no more after a victory than it did before, who had his breast instated with the choice of virtues, though they made no ambitious noise, whose resolution was so fiery still it seemed he no better to die than kill, and yet drew fortune, as the adamant steel, seeming to have fixed a stay upon her wheel, who jestingly would say, it was his trade to fashion deathbeds, and hath often made horror look lovely, When I the fields there lay arms and legs so distracted, one would say that the dead bodies had no bodies left, he that of working pulse sick France bereft, who knew that battles, not the gaudy show of ceremonies, do on kings bestow best theatres, to whom not so tedious as court sport, that thought all fans and ventoys of the court ridiculous and loathsome to the shade which, in a march, his waving ensign made. Him did he strive to imitate, and was sorry he did not live before him, that his glory might have been his example. To these ends, those men that followed him were not by friends or letters preferred to him, he made choice in action, not in complimental voice. And as Marcellus did 2 temples rear to honor and to virtue, placed so near they kissed, yet none to honors got access but they that passed through virtues, so, to express his worthiness, none got his countenance but those whom actual merit did advance. Yet, alas, all his goodness lies full low. 0 greatness, what shall we compare thee to? To giants, beasts, or towers framed out of snow, or like wax-gilded tapers, more for show than durance. Thy foundation doth betray thy frailty, being builded on such clay. This shows the all-controlling power of fate, that all our scepters in our chairs of state are but glass metal, that we are full of spots and that, like new writ copies, devoid blots, dust must be thrown upon us, for in him our comfort sunk and drowned, learning to swim. And though he died so late, he's no more near to us than they that died 3,000 year before him, only memory doth keep their fame as fresh as is from death or sleep. Why should the stag or raven live so long, and that their age rather should not belong unto a righteous prince, whose length and years might assist men's necessities and fears? Let beasts live long, and wild, and still in fear, the turtle-dove never outlives 9 year. Both life and death have equally expressed, of all the shortest madness is the best. We ought not think that his great triumphs need our withered laurels. Can our weak praise feed his memory, which worthily contemns marble, and gold, and oriental gems? His merits pass our dull invention. And now, methinks, I see him smile upon our fruitless tears, bids us disperse these showers, and says his thoughts are far refined from ours, as Rome of her beloved Titus said, was from the body the bright soul was fled for his own good and their affliction. On such broken column we lean on, and for ourselves, not him, let us lament, whose happiness is grown our punishment. But, surely, God gave this as an allay to the blessed union of that nuptial day we hopped, for fear of surfeit, thought it meet to mitigate, since we swell with what is sweet. And, for sad tales suit grief, 'tis not amiss to keep us waking. I remember this. Jupiter, on some business, once sent down pleasure unto the world, that she might crown mortals with her bright beams, but her long stay exceeding far the limit of her day, such feasts and gifts were numbered to present her, that she forgot heaven and the God that sent her. He calls her thence in thunder, at whose lure she spreads her wings, and to return more pure, leaves her ice-seated robe wherein she seated, fearing that mortal breath had it polluted. Sorrow, that long had lived in banishment, tugged at the oar in galleys, and had spent both money and herself in court delays, and sadly numbered many of her be a prison calendar, though once she bragged she had been in great men's bosoms, now all ragged, crawled with a tortoise pace, or somewhat slower, nor found she any that desire to know her, till by good chance, ill hap for us, she found where pleasure laid her garment, from the ground she takes it, dons it, and, to add a grace to the deformity of her wrinkled face, an old court lady, out of mere compassion, now paints it or puts it into fashion. When straight from country, city, and from court, both without wit or number, there resort many to this impostor, all adore her haggish falsehood, usurers from their store supply her, and are cozened, citizens by her forged titles, riot and ruin fly, spreading their poison universally. Nor are the bosoms of great statesmen free from her intelligence, who lets them see themselves and fortunes in false perspectives. Some landed heirs consort her with their wives, who, being a bawd, corrupts their all-spent oaths. They have entertained the devil in pleasure's close. And since this cursed mask, which, to our cost, lasts day and night, we have entirely lost pleasure, who from heaven wills us be advised that our false pleasure is but care disguised. Thus is our hope made frustrate. 0 Sad Ruth. Death lay in ambush for his glorious youth, and, finding him prepared, was sternly bent to change his love into fell ravishment. O cruel tyrant, how canst thou repair this ruin? Though hereafter thou shouldst spare all mankind, break thy dart and eat unspayed. Thou canst not cure this wound which thou hast made. Now view his deathbed and from thence let's meet, in his example, our own winding sheet. There his humility, setting apart all titles, did retire into his heart. O blessed solitariness, that brings the best content to mean men and to kings. Manna there falls from heaven, the dove there flies with olive to the ark, a sacrifice of God's appeasement. Ravens in their beaks bring food from heaven. God's preservation speaks comfort to Daniel in the lion's den, where contemplation leads us, happy men, to see God face to face. And such sweet peace did he enjoy amongst the various priests of weeping visitants, it seemed he lay as kings at revel sit, wished the crowd away, the tedious sports done, and himself asleep, and in such joy did all his senses steep, as great accountants, troubled much in mind, when they hear news of their quietus signed. Never found prayers, since they conversed with death, a sweeter air to fly and than his breath, they left in Zeus nothing but glory shining, and though that sickness with her overpining looked ghastly, yet in him it did not so, he knew the place to which he was to go had larger titles, more triumphant wreaths to instate him with, and forth his soul he breathes, without a sigh, fixing his constant eye upon his triumph, immortality. He was rained down to us out of heaven, and drew life to the spring, yet, like a little dew, quickly drawn thence, so many times miscarries a crystal glass, whilst that the workman varies the shape by the furnace, fixed too much upon the curiousness of the proportion, yet breaks it ere tea be finished, and yet then moulds it anew, and blows it up again, exceeds his workmanship, and sends it thence to kiss the hand and lip of some great prince, or like a dial, broken wheel or screw, that's ta'en in pieces to be made go true, so to eternity he now shall stand, new formed and gloried by the all-working hand. Slander, which hath a large and spacious tongue, far bigger than her mouth, to publish wrong, and yet doth utter tea with so ill a grace, whilst she's a-speaking no man sees her face, that like dogs lick foul ulcers, not to draw infection from them, but to keep them raw, though she oft scrape up earth from good men's graves, and waste it in the standishes of slaves to throw upon their ink, shall never dare to approach his tomb, be she confined as far from his sweet reliques as is heaven from hell. Not witchcraft shall instruct her how to spell that barbarous language which shall sound him ill. Fame's lips shall bleed, yet ne'er her trumpet fill with breath enough, but not in such sick air as make waste elegies to his tomb repair, with scraps of commendation more base than are the rags they are writ on. O disgrace to nobler poesy! This brings to light, not that they can, but that they cannot write. Better they had ne'er troubled his sweet trance, so silence should have hid their ignorance, for he's a reverend subject to be penned only by his sweet Homer and my friend. Most savage nations should his death deplore, wishing he had set his foot upon their shore, only to have made them civil. This black night hath fallen upon by nature's oversight, or while the fatal sister sought to twine his thread and keep it even, she drew it so fine it burst. O all compassed of excellent parts, young, grave Maecenas of the noble arts, whose beams shall break forth from thy hollow tomb, stain the time past, and light the time to come. O thou that in thy own praise still wert mute, resembling trees, the more they are ta'en with fruit, the more they strive and bow to kiss the ground. Thou that in quest of man hast truly found, that while men rotten vapors do pursue, Theb could not be thy friends and flatters too, that, despite all injustice, wouldst have proved so just a steward for this land, and loved right for its own sake, now, O woe the while, fleets dead in tears, like to a moving isle. Time was when churches in the land were thought rich jewel houses, and this age hath bought that time again. Think not I feign, go view Henry VII's chapel, and you'll find it true, the dust of a rich diamond's there enshrined, to buy which thence would beggar the West End. What a dark night piece of tempestuous weather have the enraged clouds summoned together! As if our loftiest palaces should grow to ruin, since such highness fell so low, and angry Neptune makes his palace groan, that the deaf rocks may echo the land's moan. Even senseless things seem to have lost their pride, and look like that dead mouth wherein he died, to clear which, soon arise that glorious day which, in her sacred union, shall display infinite blessings, that we all may see the like to that of Virgil's golden tree, a branch of which being slipped, there freshly grew another that did both like form and hue. And for these worthless lines, let it be said, I hasted till I had this tribute paid unto his grave, so let the speed excuse the zealous error of my passionate muse. Yet, though his praise here bear so short a wing, Thames hath more swans that will his praises sing in sweeter tunes, bepluming his sad hearse and his three feathers, while men live for verse. And by these signs of love let great men know, that sweet and generous favor they bestow upon the muses never can be lost, for they shall live by them, when all the cost of gilded monuments shall fall to dust. They grave in metal that sustains no rust, their wood yields honey and industrious bees, kills spiders and their webs, like Irish trees. A poet's pen, like a bright scepter, sways and keeps in awe dead men's dispraise or praise. Thus took ye acquittance of all worldly strife, the evening shows the day, and death crowns life. My impressati your lordship, a swan flying to a laurel for shelter, the mo, amore mihi causa,